I never thought a satellite dish would be what finally broke the HOA's stranglehold on our neighborhood. But here we are, standing in a federal courtroom watching Deborah Patterson get handcuffed for tampering with emergency weather systems during a natural disaster. My name is Thomas Zimmerman, and I'm a meteorologist for the National Weather Service based out of Norman, Oklahoma. I moved to the planned community of Meadowbrook Heights 3 years ago because the location was perfect, close enough to work, far enough from the city to have some peace, and the house had a massive backyard that was ideal for my personal weather station. What I didn't know was that the HOA president, Deborah Patterson, would become the bane of my existence over something as simple as a satellite dish. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning in late April. I was checking my equipment before heading to work when I saw Deborah marching across my lawn in her typical power suit, clipboard in hand, her blonde highlights catching the early morning sun. She had that look on her face, the one that said someone was about to get a violation notice. "Thomas," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk about that monstrosity on your roof." I looked up at my satellite dish, a standard 18-inch receiver mounted on the southern-facing slope of my roof. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. "Good morning to you too, Deborah. What seems to be the problem?" "That dish violates our community aesthetic standards. Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the HOA bylaws clearly states that all external modifications must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee." She thrust a piece of paper at me. "You have 72 hours to remove it." I took the notice and scanned it quickly. "Deborah, this dish has been up here since I moved in 3 years ago. Why is it suddenly a problem? We're implementing stricter enforcement of our bylaws. Several residents have complained about the visual pollution in our community." She crossed her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her elbow. "The dish comes down, or you'll face daily fines of $100. That's ridiculous. This dish is protected under FCC regulations. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 specifically prohibits HOAs from preventing homeowners from installing satellite dishes under 1 meter in diameter on property they own or have exclusive control over." Deborah's face flushed red. "I don't care what some federal law says. Our bylaws supersede that. Actually, they don't. Federal law trumps HOA rules every single time." I folded the notice and handed it back to her. "The dish stays." She snatched the paper from my hand. "We'll see about that. Don't say I didn't warn you, Thomas." She stomped back across my lawn, leaving heel marks in the grass she was always complaining needed to be exactly 2.5 inches tall. I shook my head and went back to checking my weather station. The personal equipment I'd set up was more than just a hobby. It fed data directly to the National Weather Service and several universities studying Oklahoma's severe weather patterns. The satellite dish she was so concerned about was actually part of my data transmission system, allowing me to upload real-time weather information to multiple agencies. What Deborah didn't know, what most people in Meadowbrook Heights didn't know, was that my backyard weather station was one of the most sophisticated private installations in the entire state. I had anemometers measuring wind speed at 3 different heights, a barometric pressure sensor accurate to 0.01 millibars, temperature and humidity sensors in a properly ventilated radiation shield, a rain gauge that could measure precipitation down to 0.01 inches, and soil moisture sensors at various depths. The satellite dish transmitted all of this data in real time to the National Weather Service's data integration system. More importantly, my station was positioned in a critical gap in the official weather observation network. The nearest official station was 12 miles away, and the terrain between us created significant microclimate variations. My data had proven invaluable during severe weather events, providing ground truth that helped forecasters refine their warnings and predictions. 3 days later, right on schedule, I received my first fine in the mail, $100 for failure to comply with architectural standards. I filed it away and drafted a letter to the HOA citing the specific FCC regulations that protected my right to have the dish. I included copies of the relevant sections of Title 47 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1.4000, which explicitly states that HOAs cannot enforce restrictions that impair the installation, maintenance, or use of antennas used to receive video programming. Deborah's response came within a week. She rejected my legal argument and doubled the daily fine to $200. She also scheduled a special HOA board meeting to discuss the Thomas Zimmerman problem. I attended that meeting on a Thursday evening in the community clubhouse, a sprawling building that Deborah treated like her personal kingdom. About 30 residents showed up, most of them looking confused about why they'd been summoned. Deborah stood at the front of the room next to a projection screen showing a zoomed-in photo of my satellite dish. "As you can see," Deborah began, clicking to the next slide, "Mr. Zimmerman has installed unauthorized equipment that detracts from our community's curb appeal. Property values are at stake here, people. When potential buyers drive through Meadowbrook Heights, they expect to see a pristine, uniform neighborhood, not someone's personal radio station." "It's a weather station, not a radio station," I called out from the back. Deborah shot me a withering look. "The point stands. You're making our neighborhood look like a trailer park." Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My neighbor, Robert Chen, raised his hand. "Deborah, I live next door to Thomas. I barely noticed the dish. It's not that big." "That's not the point, Robert. Rules are rules. If we let Thomas keep his dish, what's next? Everyone installing their own equipment. Chaos, that's what. Or just people exercising their legal rights," I said, standing up. "I've provided documentation showing that federal law protects my right to this dish. The HOA cannot legally force me to remove it." Deborah's face turned that familiar shade of red. "This board has the authority to maintain community standards. We're voting tonight on whether to pursue legal action against Mr. Zimmerman for his continued violations." "You'd be wasting the HOA's money on a lawsuit you can't win," I said calmly. "The FCC has ruled on this exact issue hundreds of times. HOAs lose every single case when they try to restrict dishes under 1 meter in diameter." "All in favor of authorizing legal action?" Deborah asked, ignoring me completely. 4 hands went up. Deborah and her 3 closest allies on the board, Linda Morrison, Patricia Hayes, and Margaret Sullivan. The other 3 board members abstained, clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Motion passes," Deborah announced triumphantly. "Mr. Zimmerman, you'll be hearing from our attorney." I left that meeting knowing things were about to get worse before they got better. What I didn't anticipate was just how petty Deborah could be. Over the next 2 weeks, I received violation notices for everything imaginable. My grass was allegedly too long. It wasn't. I'd measured it at exactly 2.5 inches. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black. It was the same color it had been for 3 years. My front door wreath was seasonal decoration displayed outside the approved holiday window. It was a simple evergreen wreath with no ornaments. Each violation came with a $50 fine. I documented everything, took photos, and kept meticulous records. I knew Deborah was harassing me, and I was building a case. Then came the letter from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Richard Blackstone from a firm in Oklahoma City. The letter was 3 pages of legal threats demanding I remove the satellite dish within 10 days or face a lawsuit for persistent and willful violation of community covenants. I called my own attorney, a friend from college named Marcus Wu, who specialized in property law. "They don't have a leg to stand on," Marcus said after reviewing all my documentation. "The FCC regulations are crystal clear. I can draft a response that'll make them think twice about actually filing suit." "Do it," I said. "I'm tired of Deborah's games." Marcus sent a 5-page letter to both Blackstone and the HOA board, laying out the legal framework that protected my satellite dish, and pointing out that the harassment via spurious violation notices could be construed as retaliation, which might expose the HOA to liability. He included citations of similar cases where HOAs had been forced to pay homeowners attorney fees after losing these exact disputes. The spurious violations stopped immediately. For about 2 weeks, I heard nothing from Deborah or the board. I started to think maybe they'd finally gotten the message. Then the weather changed everything. It was the 2nd week of May, prime tornado season in Oklahoma. I was at work monitoring a developing severe weather situation. A strong upper-level disturbance was moving across the Texas Panhandle, and moisture was streaming north from the Gulf of Mexico. All the ingredients were coming together for a significant severe weather outbreak. By early afternoon, the Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk of severe weather for central Oklahoma, including a 15% probability of tornadoes within 25 miles of any point. That's a big deal in the weather world. It meant conditions were favorable for numerous tornadoes, possibly including strong ones. I was part of the team analyzing the data when I noticed something concerning in the information coming from my home weather station. The barometric pressure was falling rapidly, much faster than the official station 12 miles away was showing. The temperature and dew point were also diverging in a way that suggested a boundary was setting up right over Meadowbrook Heights. "Hey, look at this," I said to my colleague, Jennifer Brooks. "There's a strong gradient developing right across the metro area. My home station is showing significantly different conditions than the official site." Jennifer pulled up the data on her screen. "That's a sharp pressure gradient. And look at the wind shift. You've got southeast winds while the official station is showing south-southwest." "There's a boundary setting up," I said, feeling my pulse quicken. "Boundaries, areas where air masses with different characteristics meet, are tornado magnets during severe weather. It's right over my neighborhood." "You should call and warn them," Jennifer said. I pulled out my phone and dialed Deborah's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried the community center. No answer. I called Robert Chen, my neighbor. "Robert, it's Thomas. Is Deborah around? We've got severe weather developing and there's a boundary right over the neighborhood. People need to be ready to take shelter." "She's at the community center setting up for the spring social tonight," Robert said. "Thomas, is it bad?" "Could be. We're expecting tornadoes this evening. The setup is particularly dangerous for our area. Make sure you've got your shelter plan ready." "Will do. Thanks for the heads up." I tried the community center again. This time someone answered. "Linda Morrison, one of Deborah's board allies. Is Deborah there?" "This is Thomas Zimmerman. We've got dangerous weather coming. Hold on." I heard muffled voices, then Deborah came on the line. "What do you want, Thomas?" "Deborah, I'm at the Weather Service. We've got a severe weather outbreak developing and there's a boundary setting up right over Meadowbrook Heights. You should cancel the social tonight and make sure everyone knows to be prepared for tornadoes." There was a long pause. "Is this some kind of joke? The sky is clear here." "Not for long. The storms will fire up in the next few hours. This is serious, Deborah. Oh, I see. You think you can scare us with your weather predictions and will suddenly be grateful for your precious satellite dish. Not happening, Thomas. The social is going forward as planned. This isn't about the dish. This is about people's safety. We have weather apps on our phones, Thomas. We don't need your help. She hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Jennifer had heard the whole thing. She seriously just blew you off. Yeah. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. She thinks I'm making it up to manipulate them. That's insane. I tried calling a few other neighbors, but most people were at work and didn't answer. I left voicemails urging them to monitor the weather closely and be ready to take shelter. By 3 in the afternoon, the first storms began to develop along the dry line west of Oklahoma City. I watched them on radar, seeing the classic supercell signatures forming. These weren't just ordinary thunderstorms, these were rotating monsters capable of producing violent tornadoes. The first tornado warning was issued at 3:47 p.m. for a storm near El Reno. Then another at 4:15 p.m. south of Yukon. The storms were tracking northeast, right toward the metro area. At 5:30 p.m., my home weather station recorded a wind gust of 43 miles per hour from the southeast, the first indication that the boundary was becoming active. The temperature dropped 5 degrees in 10 minutes. The pressure was still falling. We need to highlight this area, I told my supervisor, Mark Davidson. The boundary over Meadowbrook Heights is going to be a focal point. Mark nodded, and we worked together to draft a special weather statement emphasizing the enhanced tornado risk along the boundary. It went out at 5:45 p.m. At 6:07 p.m., a supercell thunderstorm developed just southwest of Meadowbrook Heights, right along the boundary my weather station had identified. Within minutes, it showed strong rotation on radar. The tornado warning was issued at 6:12 p.m. The storm was tracking northeast at 30 miles per hour, putting it over Meadowbrook Heights in approximately 15 minutes. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. Robert answered immediately. Robert, get underground now. There's a tornado-warned storm heading right for us. I'm already in my shelter. Half the neighborhood is at the community center for the social. My blood ran cold. They're still doing the social. Yeah, Deborah insisted, said the weather was fine. The tornado warning is in effect right now. That storm will be over us in 10 minutes. Someone needs to get those people to shelter. I'll try calling the center. Robert hung up. I tried Deborah's cell again. No answer. I tried the community center. Busy. On the radar, I could see the hook echo developing on the storm, the classic signature of a tornado. The rotation was tightening, strengthening. Mark, I need to leave. My neighborhood is about to get hit and half the residents are at a social event. Go, he said without hesitation. Be safe. I ran to my car and started driving, but I was 25 minutes away in good traffic. The storm would hit in less than 10 minutes. I called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Thomas Zimmerman. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. There's a tornado-warned storm about to hit Meadowbrook Heights in Norman, and approximately 60 residents are at the community center, which is not a safe shelter. Someone needs to get them underground immediately. Sir, we're aware of the tornado warning. Are you at the location? No, I'm trying to get there, but I'm 20 minutes out. Please, send someone to the community center at Meadowbrook Heights. The building has a basement, but I don't know if they've moved people down there. I'll dispatch units immediately. I white-knuckled the steering wheel, watching the sky darken ahead of me. The rain started as I got off the highway, heavy sheets that made it hard to see. Then the hail, small at first, then growing to quarter size, pounding my windshield. My phone rang. It was Robert. Thomas, where are you? Trying to get home. Are you okay? I'm fine, I'm in my shelter. But Thomas, I can hear it. The tornado, it's loud. Stay down, stay away from any windows. It's right over us. Oh God, Thomas, it's loud. The line went dead. I was still 10 minutes from home. The rain was so heavy I could barely see the road. I pulled over, knowing it was suicide to keep driving in these conditions. For the next 15 minutes, I sat in my car under an overpass, monitoring the radar on my phone and listening to the radio coverage. The tornado was on the ground, moving through Meadowbrook Heights. Early reports indicated significant damage. When the core of the storm finally passed, I drove the rest of the way home. What I saw made my stomach drop. The tornado had carved a path right through the neighborhood, but it was weird, almost surgical in its destruction. Some houses were completely demolished while others were barely touched. The damaged path was narrow, maybe 200 yards wide. My house was intact. The satellite dish was still on the roof, still transmitting data. My weather station had recorded wind gusts up to 92 miles per hour before some of the sensors were damaged. But 3 houses down, the Martinez family's home was gone, just a concrete slab and scattered debris. Across the street, the Hendersons' roof had been ripped off, but the walls were still standing. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, my heart breaking at the destruction. Emergency vehicles were everywhere, their lights flashing in the growing darkness. Residents were emerging from shelters, some crying, others just looking stunned. The community center came into view and I felt sick. Part of the roof had collapsed. Emergency responders were helping people out of the building. I parked and ran toward the scene. A police officer stopped me. "Sir, you need to stay back. I live here. Are people hurt? We have injuries but no fatalities so far. We're still getting everyone accounted for." I saw Deborah then, sitting in the back of an ambulance with a blanket around her shoulders. Her perfect hair was a mess, her suit torn and dirty. She was crying. Robert found me in the chaos. He had a cut on his forehead but otherwise looked okay. "Thank God you're all right," I said, grabbing his shoulder. "My house is damaged, but we're okay." "Thomas, the community center, they didn't go to the basement." "Deborah said it was just a thunderstorm, that you were being dramatic. They were setting up tables when the windows blew out." "How many people were in there?" "About 50. A bunch of people are hurt. Mrs. Patterson got hit by flying debris. I think she's in shock." Over the next few hours, the full scope of the damage became clear. The tornado had been rated EF2, with peak winds estimated at 125 miles per hour. 12 homes in Meadowbrook Heights were destroyed. 34 more had significant damage. At the community center, 17 people were injured, 3 critically. The building itself was a total loss, and through it all, my weather station kept transmitting data, providing real-time ground truth that helped the National Weather Service analyze the tornado's behavior. The next few days were a blur of damage assessment, insurance claims, and community meetings. FEMA showed up, the Red Cross set up a shelter at a local school, and the neighborhood started the long process of recovery. I was at my damaged equipment in the backyard trying to salvage what I could when Deborah appeared. She looked awful pale, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "Thomas," she said quietly, "can we talk?" I put down the broken anemometer I was holding. "Sure, I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "I should have listened to you. I was so focused on winning our stupid argument that I put people in danger. 3 people are still in the hospital because of me." I didn't know what to say. I'd been angry with her for days, but seeing her broken like this, the anger faded. "People make mistakes," I finally said. "Not like this. Not mistakes that hurt people." She wiped her eyes. "I'm resigning from the HOA board. I talked to our insurance company and our attorney. The HOA is going to be sued by multiple residents for not taking proper safety precautions. They're saying we were negligent, that we ignored a warning from a qualified meteorologist. Deborah, no, they're right. I ignored you because of pride, because I couldn't stand the idea of you being right about the satellite dish. She looked up at my roof where the dish still sat, undamaged by the storm. The attorney said we never had a legal case against you anyway. The FCC regulations are clear. I wasted thousands of dollars of HOA money fighting you over something we couldn't win. What happens now? The board is dropping all the fines and violations against you. We're also passing a resolution acknowledging the importance of your weather station to community safety. And personally, I'm going to recommend that the HOA pay for repairs to your equipment. It might have saved lives if people had listened to your warnings. She left after that, and I went back to assessing the damage. Out of my full sensor array, about 60% of the equipment was damaged or destroyed. The satellite dish, ironically, was fine. So were the data transmission systems. But I'd lost anemometers, the rain gauge, several temperature sensors, and my soil moisture array. A week after the tornado, I was sitting on my porch when a man in a suit walked up. He introduced himself as James Chen, an attorney representing several families from the community center. Mr. Zimmerman, I'm building a case regarding the events at the community center during the tornado. I understand you warned the HOA president about the severe weather several hours before it hit. I did. I called her from work around 1 in the afternoon, then again later. And what was her response? I hesitated. I didn't want to bury Deborah despite everything she'd put me through. Mr. Zimmerman, 3 people nearly died. They have a right to know what happened. So I told him everything: the phone calls, Deborah's dismissal of my warnings, her accusation that I was trying to manipulate them. And your weather station, it's connected to the National Weather Service. Yes, it feeds real-time data to their network. It's also the only official weather observation point in this immediate area. So when you warned Mrs. Patterson, you were speaking as a professional meteorologist with access to official weather data, not just as a concerned neighbor. That's correct. James made notes. This is very helpful. Thank you for your time. 2 weeks later, the lawsuit started. 3 families sued the HOA for negligence in failing to take appropriate safety measures despite being warned by a qualified expert. The HOA's insurance company tried to settle quickly, but the families wanted accountability. Then things took a darker turn. During the discovery process, the attorneys uncovered something interesting in the HOA's financial records. Deborah had been embezzling money from the HOA for almost 2 years, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums. The legal fees spent fighting me over the satellite dish. Most of that money had gone to a fake law firm she'd created. The violation fines she'd collected from me and other residents. A significant portion had been deposited into her personal accounts. In total, she'd stolen over $80,000 from the HOA. The discovery came out in early June, and within days, the FBI was involved. Financial fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, the charges kept stacking up. And because she'd used the HOA's funds in a way that endangered residents during a natural disaster, federal prosecutors added additional charges related to the emergency response. I was in my backyard installing replacement weather sensors when 2 FBI agents came to talk to me. They wanted to know about the timeline of events, about Deborah's behavior, about the violations and fines. "Did you ever suspect she was stealing?" Agent Williams asked. "No. I thought she was just a power-hungry HOA president. I had no idea about the financial stuff." She got sloppy, Agent Martinez said. Started taking bigger amounts, got careless with the documentation. The legal battle with you was actually her attempt to justify some of the expenses, but she faked most of the attorney invoices. What's going to happen to her? That's up to the prosecutors, but she's looking at serious federal time. The U.S. Attorney's office doesn't mess around with this kind of fraud. The criminal case moved surprisingly quickly. Deborah's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested in being lenient. The case went to trial in September. I was called to testify about the events leading up to the tornado. The prosecution wanted to establish a pattern of Deborah prioritizing her personal agenda over the community's welfare. I explained my role as a meteorologist, the importance of my weather station, and how Deborah had tried to force me to remove the equipment that ended up providing critical data during the tornado. And when you called to warn her about the severe weather, what did she say? The prosecutor asked. She said we had weather apps on our phones and didn't need my help. She accused me of trying to manipulate them into being grateful for my satellite dish. She refused to cancel the social event or warn residents to take precautions. In your professional opinion as a meteorologist, was the threat serious enough to warrant canceling the event? Absolutely. We had a moderate-risk severe weather outlook with a 15% tornado probability. My weather station was showing boundary development that significantly increased the risk for our specific location. I would have canceled any outdoor event and ensured people had access to adequate shelter. The defense attorney tried to argue that Deborah wasn't a weather expert and couldn't be expected to understand the technical details I'd provided. I pointed out that I'd explicitly told her we were expecting tornadoes and that the situation was dangerous. The financial fraud charges were even more damning. The prosecution brought in forensic accountants who traced every dollar Deborah had stolen. They showed how she'd created fake companies, forged invoices, and manipulated the HOA's books to hide her theft. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, Deborah stood there as the verdicts were read, tears streaming down her face. I almost felt sorry for her, but then I thought about the families who'd been injured in the tornado, about the money she'd stolen from neighbors who trusted her, about the harassment she'd put me through over a satellite dish. Sentencing came 2 months later. The judge was not sympathetic. Mrs. Patterson, you held a position of trust in your community, and you betrayed that trust in multiple ways. You stole money from your neighbors. You used your position to harass residents who disagreed with you. And most egregiously, you ignored warnings about a natural disaster, putting dozens of people at risk because you were more concerned with winning a petty dispute than with their safety. 3 people nearly died because of your negligence and pride. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and to the families who'd been injured. As Deborah was led away in handcuffs, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that it was over, sadness that it had come to this, and a renewed appreciation for the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. The HOA went through a complete reorganization after that. A new board was elected, and their first official act was to pass a resolution thanking me for my weather station and acknowledging its importance to community safety. They also voted to reimburse me for the damaged equipment and to designate my property as having special exception status for weather-related equipment. The satellite dish that had started the whole mess stayed right where it was on my roof, transmitting data 24 hours a day. I upgraded my ground equipment, adding even more sensors and improving the data quality. The National Weather Service officially recognized my station as a critical node in their observing network, and even provided some funding for equipment upgrades. Life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly returned to normal. The damaged homes were rebuilt. The community center was demolished, and a new one was constructed with a proper storm shelter that could accommodate the entire neighborhood. The new HOA board made emergency preparedness a priority, installing weather sirens and creating a text alert system that I helped them set up. Robert Chen was elected HOA president in the special election. His first call after winning was to me. "Thomas, I need your help. We're creating an emergency preparedness committee and I want you to chair it." "I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not exactly popular with everyone after what happened with Deborah." "Are you kidding? You're a hero. You tried to warn us and you were right. We need your expertise." I agreed, and over the next year we transformed Meadowbrook Heights into one of the most weather-prepared communities in Oklahoma. Every home had a designated shelter area. We created detailed evacuation plans. We installed redundant warning systems. And my weather station became the official data source for our local emergency alerts. The following spring, almost exactly a year after the first tornado, another severe weather outbreak threatened central Oklahoma. This time, when I called Robert to warn him about dangerous weather developing, he immediately activated our emergency plan. The community center was opened as a shelter. Text alerts went out to every resident. People knew exactly what to do and where to go. The tornado that evening passed just south of our neighborhood, but everyone was safely sheltered. No injuries, no panic, just a well-executed emergency plan. After the all-clear was given, Robert called me. "Your station showed the storm shifting south about 20 minutes before it arrived. That gave us time to update everyone. Your equipment probably saved lives tonight." "That's what it's there for," I said, looking up at the satellite dish on my roof. Deborah was released to a halfway house after serving 5 years of her sentence. I heard she moved to Texas to live with relatives, trying to rebuild her life far away from the community she'd betrayed. I never saw her again. The lawsuits from the tornado victims were settled by the HOA's insurance company for undisclosed amounts. The insurance premiums went up, but the new board managed the finances responsibly and rebuilt the community's reserves. As for me, I continued my work at the National Weather Service and maintained my weather station. The satellite dish that had caused so much trouble became a symbol of something larger: the importance of standing up to unreasonable authority, the value of scientific data in protecting communities, and the power of technology to save lives. I gave talks at local schools about severe weather safety and the science of meteorology. Kids would come to my house on field trips to see the weather station in action. The satellite dish that Deborah had called a monstrosity became an educational tool and a community resource. 3 years after the tornado, I was working in my backyard when a family walked up, parents and 2 young kids. I recognized them as the new residents who'd bought the Martinez house after it was rebuilt. "Are you Thomas Zimmerman?" the father asked. "I am. I wanted to thank you. We read about what happened here, about your weather station and how you tried to warn everyone. It's one of the reasons we felt safe buying here. We know this neighborhood takes severe weather seriously now." "We learned some hard lessons," I said. "Well, we appreciate what you do." He gestured to his kids. "These 2 are fascinated by weather. Would you mind showing them your equipment?" I spent the next hour showing the kids how the weather station worked, explaining the different sensors and what they measured. Their eyes lit up when I showed them the real-time data streaming to the National Weather Service. "So your satellite dish helps protect people?" the little girl asked. "In a way, yes. It sends important information to weather forecasters who use it to make better predictions and warnings." "That's so cool," she said. After they left, I sat on my porch and looked up at the satellite dish. Such a small thing to have caused so much trouble. But in the end, it had exposed corruption, improved community safety, and maybe even inspired some future meteorologists. The evening sky was clear, but I knew better than to trust appearances. I checked the forecast: quiet weather expected for the next several days. My station was transmitting steady data showing calm conditions. Everything was functioning perfectly. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from that first confrontation with Deborah to the federal courtroom where justice was finally served. It had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times frightening. But it had also been necessary. Sometimes standing up for what's right means fighting battles you never wanted to fight. Sometimes it means being vilified for doing the right thing. Sometimes it means watching people face consequences for their own poor choices. But in the end, the truth wins out. Science doesn't care about HOA bylaws or personal grudges or power games. A tornado doesn't check the community aesthetic standards before it destroys a neighborhood. And a satellite dish isn't just an eyesore, it's a lifeline to the data and information that can save lives. My phone buzzed with an alert from the Storm Prediction Center. They were highlighting a slight risk of severe weather for later in the week. I made a note to check the models in the morning and brief Robert if conditions looked like they might develop into anything significant. The sun was setting over Meadowbrook Heights, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The neighborhood looked peaceful, recovered from the trauma of that violent spring day years ago. The new community center gleamed in the fading light, its storm shelter entrance clearly marked. The rebuilt homes stood solid and strong, and on my roof, the satellite dish continued its quiet work, transmitting data into the network of technology and science that helps keep people safe. It wasn't much to look at, just an 18-inch oval of metal and electronics. But it represented something important: the power of knowledge, the importance of preparation, and the courage to stand up to unreasonable authority. I never imagined a simple satellite dish would lead to federal criminal charges and years of legal battles. I never wanted to be the person who exposed HOA corruption or testified in a fraud trial. I just wanted to do my job, contribute to severe weather research, and live peacefully in my neighborhood. But sometimes life has other plans. Sometimes a small stand on principle becomes something much larger. Sometimes refusing to back down in the face of bullying and intimidation starts a chain of events that transforms an entire community. As I headed inside for the evening, I glanced back at the dish one more time. It was still there, still working, still transmitting the data that had become so critical to our community's safety. Deborah had demanded I take it down before a storm, thinking she could bully me into compliance. Instead, by keeping it up and continuing to provide the weather data she tried to suppress, I'd helped expose her crimes, protect my neighbors, and create a lasting legacy of safety and preparedness in Meadowbrook Heights. The dish stayed up. The data kept flowing. And the community was better for it. That's how a simple satellite dish, an overzealous HOA president, and a meteorologist who refused to back down became a story about justice, safety, and the importance of standing up for what's right even when the storm clouds are gathering, and it would be easier to just comply. I learned a lot from that experience. I learned that federal law exists for good reasons, and it's worth defending those protections even when facing local opposition. I learned that technology and science have real-world importance beyond just academic interest. I learned that communities can come together and improve after tragedy if they're willing to learn from their mistakes. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the smallest acts of resistance, refusing to take down a satellite dish, insisting on following proper safety procedures, standing up to unreasonable demands, can have ripple effects far beyond what anyone imagines. The new HOA board worked with me to create guidelines for other residents who wanted to install weather monitoring equipment or other scientific instruments. We developed reasonable standards that balanced aesthetic concerns with practical functionality. Several other homes in the neighborhood now have rain gauges and basic temperature sensors, all feeding into a community weather network that provides hyperlocal data for our area. The data from our neighborhood has been cited in multiple research papers about Oklahoma severe weather patterns. University meteorology students have done projects analyzing the unique microclimate effects in our area. The National Weather Service has used our observations to validate and improve their forecast models. None of that would have happened if I'd taken down the satellite dish when Deborah first demanded it. None of that would exist if I just paid the fines and complied with her unreasonable restrictions. Standing up to the HOA was the right choice, even though it led to months of harassment and conflict. Providing weather data despite Deborah's attempts to silence me was the right choice, even though she tried to use it against me. Testifying in the criminal trial was the right choice, even though it was uncomfortable to publicly detail everything that had happened. Every step of that journey was necessary to get to where we are now, a safer, more prepared community with a culture of scientific literacy and emergency readiness. The weather station is more than just equipment now. It's a symbol of what Meadowbrook Heights stands for: truth over convenience, safety over aesthetics, community welfare over individual power games. Every time someone drives through the neighborhood and sees that satellite dish on my roof, they see a reminder that we take severe weather seriously here. We learn from our mistakes, we protect each other, and we definitely don't let petty tyrants endanger lives over neighborhood appearance standards. As I sit here now, monitoring the quiet weather data streaming from my sensors, I feel grateful for how everything turned out. Grateful that the tornado didn't kill anyone, despite Deborah's negligence. Grateful that her financial crimes were discovered and prosecuted. Grateful that the community came together to rebuild and improve. But I'm also mindful that these battles are never truly over. There will always be people who prioritize control over reason, appearance over function, personal power over community welfare. There will always be HOA boards and petty officials who think they can ignore federal law or expert advice because they have local authority. The key is to stand firm, document everything, know your rights, and never back down when you're in the right. Federal law protects satellite dishes for good reasons. Communications and information access are fundamental to modern life. The FCC regulations exist because lawmakers understood that local authorities might try to restrict these vital technologies for superficial reasons. My experience proves why those protections matter. If Deborah had succeeded in forcing me to remove my satellite dish, the neighborhood would have lost access to critical hyperlocal weather data. People might have died in that tornado because they didn't have adequate warning. The corruption might have continued undiscovered for years, stealing even more money from residents. One person standing up to unreasonable authority made all the difference. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd just taken the dish down that first day when Deborah demanded it. Would she have stopped there, Or would she have found other targets for her power trips? Would her embezzlement have continued indefinitely? Would the community center have had adequate shelter during the tornado? There's no way to know, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I'm glad I fought back, even when it was hard. I'm glad I trusted in the law and in the importance of the work I was doing. The satellite dish stays up, a small victory that turned into something much more significant. It's a reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hard thing. Sometimes standing on principle means enduring harassment and legal threats. Sometimes doing your job means defying local authority that has overstepped its bounds. But in the end, the truth prevails. Justice wins out. And communities that learn from their mistakes can become stronger and safer than they were before. Meadowbrook Heights is proof of that transformation. We went from a neighborhood terrorized by a corrupt HOA president to a model community for emergency preparedness and scientific literacy. We went from fighting over a satellite dish to embracing technology as a life-saving tool. And I went from being the troublemaker who wouldn't follow the rules to being the person who helped expose corruption and improve community safety. The same persistence that made me keep my satellite dish despite Deborah's demands also made me keep fighting for what was right even when the battle seemed endless. That's the real lesson of this whole experience. Persistence matters. Knowing your rights matters. Standing up to bullies matters. And sometimes a simple satellite dish can change everything. The data keeps flowing. The community stays safe. And somewhere in Texas, Deborah Patterson hopefully learned that power without responsibility leads to nothing but destruction for others and ultimately for yourself. As for me, I continue doing what I've always done. Monitoring the weather, providing data to help forecasters make accurate predictions, and working to keep my community safe from the severe storms that are an inevitable part of life in Oklahoma. The satellite dish on my roof keeps spinning, keeps transmitting, keeps serving its purpose. It's exactly where it belongs, protected by federal law and valued by a community that learned the hard way why expertise and preparation matter more than appearance and control. And every time storm clouds gather on the horizon, I'm grateful that I stood my ground and kept that dish exactly where it was sending out the data that helps save lives, one transmission at a time.